Okay. All right, why don't we do a call to order? It's 4:36 and Melanie or Kelly, you want to do roll call, please?
Melanie, feel free.
Okay, Barbara Franco,
Here.
Skip Kaiser,
Here.
Richard Beck.
Here.
Kevin Brooks,
Present.
Jason Gramlich.
Present.
Absent is Scott Warren and Jill Barwick at this time, and that's established our quorum.
Okay,
For the district, sorry, you want me to go through the district staff?
that would be awesome.
Okay, we have Mike Pearson,
Present.
Rob Manguela, not present at this time, Kelly Jurgensen,
Here.
myself, Melanie Rashbaum Griffiths, and today we have joining us also Patty Paulson with Key Analytics and our district new Chief Technology Officer, Jordan Michaels.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And Melanie, I'm here, Jill Barwick.
Oh, hi, Jill. Thank you for joining us. Very good. That should be it.
Okay. All right, with that, we will move on to the acceptance of the agenda. So today's agenda is focused on section 3.2, which is expenditures review. These sections are referenced from our bylaws that have been created for us by the district. We intend to go over the content or format of the annual report to be presented next year with a goal of being presented to the Board of Trustees in March, conditioned on several predecessor activities being completed. We have some project updates. I'm sorry. And then backing up, part of section 3.2 will also be a discussion of bond funds versus independent funds to the bond, as well as funds that are enabled by the bond funds, but outside of the bond fund itself. We will then have some project updates and do some housekeeping items.
Kevin, we do have, Carlos is on a time constraint, so he has asked us to move his 2 items up. So Carlos, if you could identify your 2 items, then maybe we could request to get those moved forward. Carlos has to be out of here within the hour, so we're gonna make sure we get his items in.
Yeah, it's 3.2B, which is the item on non-bond funds that you mentioned. And then there's a very short informational item for the committee under 10A, reflecting some new legislation on remote meetings. I was hoping we could have since that's almost the last item on the agenda, probably won't get to it by 5:30. So if we could move that up, maybe to follow my first item, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, we're happy to, I think we're happy to move both your items to the front.
Okay.
That probably can not be, that's probably not an issue.
Okay.
All right, any questions on the agenda? All right, with that, do we have a motion to accept the agenda?
With the changes from Carlos, I move that we accept it.
I second, Jill.
Jill, thank you, sorry. Okay, all in favor?
All right.
Aye, any opposed? Okay, that's a thumbs up from Skip, so. All right, with that, the agenda is accepted. All right. Approval of the minutes. All right, so there were several documents in the Google Drive for today's meeting, including 2 versions of the meeting minutes. I'd like to open up questions or comments on the meeting minutes, the revised meeting minutes. The chair also has some comments, but I will let the other committee members go first.
So just for some context, the revised meeting minutes that were in the folder were upon Skip's request for some changes that he wanted to make to the minutes. We wanted to make sure we reflected the original minutes and then some of the changes that he wanted. So whatever you vote upon, you can vote upon either one of those versions. You can vote upon an annotated version, depending on what everybody else's comments are.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Skip, do you have any other comments? We'll start with you. Do you have any other comments on the minutes?
No, there were just a couple of items that I sent to Kelly. I think one of the paragraphs didn't make any sense to me when I read it, and it's subsequently been changed. And the other one I thought looked like a couple of sentences had been concatenated or whatever. So, but the revised copy of the minutes that was in the board package is what what I had intended with my comments, and that's acceptable to me.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other comments on the minutes? Okay, let me wade in. I had some questions or some comments relative to item 6, review of expenditures. So what we did last time was a financial review in Napa Junction, and the what we looked at was a encumbrance report by vendor, right? So it's, in my language, it would be commitments issued to a commitment status report by vendor. So question to you, Kelly or Patty, right? That may or may not represent all the incumbents, all the costs that Napa Junction has incurred, correct?
So as of the date of that report, that would represent all of the encumbrances for Napa Junction. The report that I gave you last time was for Measure H expenditures only. The report that I provided this time, because you asked for it sorted by object, also includes expenditures out of Fund 40, because I know the committee was interested in seeing the whole picture of that project, not just Measure H. So yes, to answer your question, the report from last meeting was as of the end of the fiscal year. Those were the expenditures for Napa Junction, everything that we had encumbered to date under Measure H. The report that is in your packet for this meeting has all of the encumbrances for Measure H and the additional funding, and is up to date as of today. So if there were expenditures between the last time the report was run and the one that you're looking at today, you'll see that the totals are different. They're also different because, per our last conversation about interest in the whole picture of what went on with that project, I also included the other funding sources.
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess that clears that up, and that makes sense. And that is probably typical across not just Napa Junction, but other campuses and other projects as well, right?
Yes. So typically an encumbrance report is going to show the committee every item that the district has purchased that they have encumbered a cost. It might not be their total expenditure, or it might not show expenditures. Expenditures are always going to be less because that's how much money we actually paid out to a contractor. So if I have a contract with a contractor for $1 million, I've encumbered that entire $1 million, but 50% through the project, obviously I've only paid them $500,000, in simple terms. So
Right.
An expenditure is different than an encumbrance. What I was showing you was encumbrance. So it's showing you everything we've committed to spending on the project.
Okay, correct. And that, so that would include AP as well, right? And by that, I mean, it's not only, it's all the committed costs on Napa Junction
That is correct.
through whatever point in time
The report is run. Mhm.
a report is run, whether it's solely Measure H phase code or Measure H plus other phase codes.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. As far as the architectural ad services, I need a refresher on where we stand with that information, Kelly, please.
It's covered in the meeting agenda for this meeting.
Okay. I guess I should have realized that since we just went over that. Okay. Anybody else have any questions about the meeting minutes from September 8th? All right, with that, do we have a motion to accept the meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Barb, okay, do we have a second?
I'll second. Skip.
Okay, all in favor? Aye, any opposed? All right, then the meeting minutes are approved. All right, do we have any members of the public present?
Not at this time.
All right, then we will forego the formality of reading the preamble for item 5 on the agenda. Excuse me, back to the agenda. All right,
So this is where we'd skip around a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and per the approval of changes to the agenda, I'm going to skip the annual report review for just a moment. I'm going to pull up Carlos's first presentation on Purview. Give me 1 second, everybody.
right, and so some background here. At the September meeting, there was a discussion on the anticipated spend down of Measure H funds, as well as the spend down of developer fees, which are not associated with Measure H, as well as the spend down of other funds that are not Measure H, but are required because Measure H is being executed. And out of that came a discussion of the purview of the CBOC relative to other funds besides Measure H funds. And we wanted to clarify and have a more detailed discussion on the nuances around that topic. So with that, Carlos, while you're wide awake, we'll let you embark on what I'm sure will be an interesting discussion.
Okay. There's only 2 slides to this because I think there's not a lot to say, but certainly there may be questions from the committee about this. And you're right, this is specifically in response to a question that was raised. And I think the word that was used was, what is the committee's jurisdiction over non-bond funds? And when I say non-bond funds, I mean all of the types of funds that Kevin just mentioned. So developer fees, state matching funds, basically anything that's not generated by the issuance of Measure H bonds. And so it's not, this is just for the committee's information, not trying to quell any discussion about non-bond funds, just to make it clear what it is that the committee is responsible for. So in terms of jurisdiction, I didn't think that was the best word to use. It's kind of an odd word to use for a citizen oversight committee. I think the best way to think about it is that, number one, the committee is not being asked to reach any conclusions with respect to whether non-bond proceeds are being spent appropriately by the district. And so we've quoted sort of the 2 sections of the bylaws that would sort of make that clear. However, so you're not asked to reach any conclusions about those non-bond funds. You're not asked to inform the public about whether those non-bond funds are being spent appropriately. However, and if we can skip to the next slide, and this is something that I know Skip has pointed out many times, and he's right about this, that the Education Code does contemplate and want the committee to review efforts to maximize bond revenues by implementing cost-saving measures. And the Ed Code provides a non-exclusive list of what those might be, but it's non-exclusive. So I think it's perfectly reasonable for the committee to receive and request information about the extent to which the district is seeking out and qualifying for supplemental funds to aid in the completion of projects, because that is an effort to spread the Measure H dollars around as much as possible and not sole source projects to the Measure H program when other types of funds might be accessible. So perfectly legitimate, I think, for the committee to request and receive information in that regard. You know, I included one of the items in that non-exclusive list, which I think sort of tacitly supports that. One of the things that the Education Code wants you to review is recommendations regarding the joint use of facilities. So if, and that may not be feasible here, but if the district were to consider a joint use facility with the city of Napa, for example, it would be proper and appropriate, I think, for the committee to ask, well, how much is the city kicking in? Are they kicking in anything to this project? What are going to be their rights with respect to this facility? How's that going to be managed? Those kinds of questions, I think, are all reasonable inquiries that the committee can make. So even though you don't have any specific responsibilities with respect to non-bond funds, certainly as part of reviewing cost-saving measures, you can receive and ask information about that. And I don't know if Kelly wants to add anything about how that information has been shown to you in the past or presented. But
yeah, so thank you for that. I think one of the, obviously the main ways that's presented is in the implementation plan, which also lists the funding sources for projects outside of Measure H. In addition, in this presentation, we're going to show you the encumbrances all across all measures for Napa Junction, like we talked about. And then there's also a slide today where the committee had asked for a spend down schedule of Measure H. We're also providing information on the projects that are funded outside of Measure H as well. And then if there are additional questions, we're happy to indulge them. I don't know, Mike, anything else I'm missing there?
No, I think you got it, Kelly. Thank you.
Okay.
so I guess if there's questions about that, I'm happy to answer anything.
So I guess just to paraphrase Carlos, right? There's no quote unquote responsibilities that the committee has relative to non-Measure H funds, but there's no, it's appropriate for the committee to be informed on non-Measure H funds under, for example, section 3.1, you know, our responsibility to inform the public. Fair statement? Speaking loosely, not legally.
I think that's right.
Okay. And I guess a question for Mike. So I assume that we assume that the management is that there's the same team is managing the Measure H funds, the same district team and same Van Pelt's team is managing the Measure H funds and the non-Measure H funds capital program. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, well, I would want you, I mean, I'll clarify the team, and that means even, I don't think he's on this right now, but we do have to work with Rob Manguala with our business services and his team as well on the funds. But yes, I mean, what you're saying is, yes, we the district manage these funds, but it's not just my team. I involve Rob's team as well too.
Okay, but right. Okay. So everybody we see with Measure H, we would also see with the non-Measure H funds. You and Rob and Kelly and Melanie and everybody else.
And if you were to look at the updated implementation plan, you'll also see that there is funding through the other funds for capital management, as well as, and not just Measure H. So there's funding for that management in the implementation plan that comes out of the other funds as well.
Okay. And just since we're on this topic, right, just jumping around back to the encumbrance report. You guys have one pot of money for management. You don't allocate that to the individual projects that are being managed at any point in time. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but hopefully, Kelly, you understand what I mean.
Yes, that is correct.
So in the case of Napa Junction, right, we're not going to see a line item for Van Pelps or NVUSD, right? That goes into a separate program-wide account.
That is correct.
Okay.
Kevin? Can I say a couple of things?
Yes, please, Skip.
I had a question earlier, and I'll get to what Carlos was talking about. With regard to the fact that Van Pelt manages more than just Measure H, or manages projects for which the funding is multiple sources, is the management fee allocated or spread across the various funds? It's not all allocated to Measure H, is it? That was a question.
Yeah, so right now the current contract is allocated to Measure H. As it goes on, it will transition to funds out of from the state funding. I believe in the implementation plan, it's out of Fund 35. I'm sorry, I don't have the list in front of me at the moment. But it will transition for the remainder of the capital improvement program to come out of a different funding source to cover the end. Because basically we're going to be out of Measure H money pretty quick here, which you'll see in the upcoming slides, but you will continue to have money out of those other sources. And at that point, the management fee will be coming out of a different source to cover that.
So to polarize the situation, would it be fair to say that Measure H is paying for the management of the expense of other sourced funds? Is that a correct statement?
I'm not sure if I completely agree with that. I mean, I'm sorry. I don't believe that I completely agree with that, only in the sense that a lot of the projects that we're doing right now are cross-funded. They're funded with Measure H money and Fund 40 money at the time, right now. Now, next year, in the coming months, we're going to transition to projects that are completely funded with outside of Measure H, at which point then you would be also paying for management completely outside of Measure H as well.
Okay, I don't want to take up too much time on this. I'll pursue it via another channel. With regard to
No, go ahead, Skip, excuse me.
with regard to what Carlos was saying, I was glad to hear what he said. And I would ask that the slides, which I'm sure will be part of the minutes package or whatever, but I'd like them specifically referenced or included in the minutes by reference, if that, if nothing else. And those ought to be available as part of the Measure H committee's section on the school district's website.
They're available right now on the website as we speak.
That's worked for me, and I appreciate Carlos's acknowledgement of the fact that there are some other aspects to overseeing Measure H funds, which inevitably lead to other sources, other revenue sources.
Carlos, I have a question for you. If in fact Measure H is paying for the management fees, then isn't actually our responsibility, since they're being paid for it, to look at those other things? That, I mean, wouldn't that be sort of incumbent on us to make sure that the other things are being run well, since we are paying for the management, since H is paying for the management part of it?
Well, I think as a legal matter, you can pay for management fees out of bond proceeds. Even though a particular project may have supplemental funds associated with it. I don't know that I'd say because of that, you now have responsibility to review the entirety of that, how those non-proceeds bond proceeds are accounted for, whether the expenditure of those non-bond proceeds complies with, if it's developer fees, the law regarding developer fees. I don't know that I'd say that.
Okay. Well, I mean, we just don't want to be left saying, well, how come you didn't talk about this? They were paying for it. I mean, so it's your opinion that it's not necessary to do that?
I think it's totally proper for you to ask the question that Skip asked, which is the bond program paying for program management fees for projects that have more than one source? I think that's a completely valid line of inquiry to ask. Yeah, Skip.
Yeah, this could go on for some time, and I don't want to take up time because I don't want the meeting to run long. But in 2004, the California Attorney General issued an opinion, and it used to be that we couldn't use bond funds passed under Prop 39 for any kind of management. And in 2004, basically, the Attorney General came out and he said, in fact, it is legitimate to the extent that the individual's efforts are directed towards a Measure H project. The point being, and specifically the opinion issued talks about school district employees, which I suppose extends to Van Pelt under a contract status. And I will reread this and I'll kick out one of my famous multi-page emails. But my reading of that was that the extent to which somebody could be reimbursed from Measure H funds for management only extended to the relative amount of effort that they were expending on that. And so I'm a little concerned that Measure H, without regard to the fact that Measure H is going to run its course and be out of funds at some point, I'm a little concerned that Measure H funds are in fact being used to manage portions of a project which are not funded by Measure H. I'll leave it at there. I don't want to get into a long-winded discussion. There's plenty of time to take this up later, but anyway, that was the thrust of the gist of my question. And I think that needs to be looked at.
So Carlos, I would appreciate if you would do some research on this and make sure that the school district is either using, as I want to say the word incorrectly, but is following the letter of the law. That if that is, because we consciously made a decision to put on the implementation plan the different funds out there. I don't think they had ever been put out there like that before. And so we consciously made an effort to do that, and I was looking at it consciously as an effort to stretch the Measure H dollars, since we have so much facility needs that has to happen in our school district. Instead of just and knowing that you could stretch a project, you could get more out of a project using this money versus just keeping them separately in different isolated in different columns. But if there's an issue around the management fees, then we need to correct that issue. If there's any issues within the management fees, to make sure that the management fees are being applied correctly, if it's Measure H or if it's Fund 35, 25, or 40. I want to make sure that happens, because that's important to me, to making sure that we're following whatever the law says in accordance to these management fees.
Sure, I'll give it some thought and I'll have something for the committee in January.
Great, thank you, sir.
Could I get a refresher on the numbers again, 35, 25, and 40?
Yeah, so 25 is developer fees.
Okay.
35 is facilities / state funding. So that's when we get any kind of hardship money or matching money, and matching is the wrong word, a portion of the project money, construction cost back. And then Fund 40 is property sale, loosely defined.
Yeah, also donations and Fund 40, which we actually do have.
Okay.
Also, to be clear, from a reporting standpoint, from the accounting side, what occurs is the money hits Fund 35, which is why we show it the way we do in the implementation plan, because legally, when the state gives funds, it has to hit Fund 35. At the point in which it's spent, it is transferred to Fund 40 for spending only. So it's lined out as Fund 35, so that the committee can see the difference between the state money that's coming in donations and property sale, but when it's spent out of Fund 40. Just to be super clear, because if you were to get subsequent reports, that's how it would look.
I think the other thing I'd like, Carlos, if you could lend some clarity on this, is if we continue to choose to, I guess, commingle money, I hate using that word commingle too, doesn't sound right, but if we choose to partner money between two funding sources to complete a project, and it does come down, and we need to then separate or a portion of the management fees needs to be allocated to a fund that we mentioned earlier based on the percentage that we're using. You mentioned that the committee members can request and receive information on funds, which is permissible, but would it also mean that they have, if there's management fees coming out of the fund, do they have, what's the role of the CBOC in that case, if that makes sense? Do you see what I'm saying?
In terms of the portion of the management fee being funded by non-bond proceeds?
Correct, yes.
Well, certainly the committee has a right to know what that percentage is, what the portion is, how that percentage was determined.
Okay.
I would imagine the inquiry wouldn't go much farther than that, because at that point you wouldn't be talking about whether bond proceeds are being spent appropriately, but whether those non-bond funds are being applied appropriately.
Okay.
So, not that the committee couldn't discuss it and get information, it just were
Right.
a little bit off the beaten path at that point.
Okay, well, I think if we can, those two things, I think would be, I think would add some clarity to the committee. And Kevin, I'm jumping in here and taking over a little bit, but if that's not appropriate, please say it's not appropriate. But I think it'd be helpful to have Carlos come in next time to talk about those two items.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's important. So Kelly, I have a follow-up question because I'm confused again, but I'll get there in a minute. My takeaways are, we don't have to write a letter or do an annual report for funds 35, 25, and 40 like we do for Measure H funds every year. It is reasonable for the committee to be informed of the goings on of those funds, particularly in light of, I would say, Fund 35, which is able to acquire funds because of the Measure H projects that are being done.
Right.
And that appropriateness is not only is based on the foundation of having us informed so that we can fulfill our obligation under 3.1 to inform the public. Very loosely stated.
I think that's right, with a small corollary. If you had a project that was not funded with bond proceeds at all, then I think the committee wouldn't have any role in reviewing those expenditures, because at that point, we're not in furtherance of what the committee's purpose is. Now, it may be that there isn't a single project that's sole source to something like developer fees, but an example would be the district did a lease financing a couple of years ago for equipment. None of that was paid with bond proceeds, so that would be outside entirely the purview of the committee.
Okay. Well, more on that to follow in January. January is looking to be a very busy month. And my apologies to everybody, but while we're on the topic, Kelly, so you said Fund 35, or somebody said Fund 35 was facilities and state, quote unquote, matching or enabling funding. 25 is developer fees and 40 is property sales / donations.
Correct.
Kelly, you lost me when you said money goes into and out of 35.
So what she was referring to is that the money from a technical standpoint from the state needs to be deposited in Fund 35.
Correct.
When it is spent, it moves into Fund 40 and then is spent out of Fund 40.
Because it's considered a donation from the state. Something
I'd have
like
to,
that.
I honestly would have to ask Rob what the technical reasons are on that.
Okay. So in other words, you're going to see in and outs on Fund 35 when you run a ledger report, right?
That's exactly right.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you all. Are there any other comments or questions about item 6.B on the agenda? Going once, going twice. Sold. Okay, with that, Carlos, do you want to move on to your other item?
Yes, considerably less interesting, the Brown Act. But it is and very quickly. So this is just an update for the committee on the state of the world in terms of remote meetings now that we're pushing towards the end of the pandemic, hopefully. So for the past year, you guys have been meeting remotely and have had relaxed Brown Act requirements as it relates to teleconference meetings. So you have not had to identify the physical location from where you're calling. You have not had to make that location accessible to the public. A quorum did not have to be present within the boundaries of the district for purposes of those meetings. And so you were allowed to do that by virtue of an executive order that the governor issued at the beginning of the pandemic and which expired in September of this year. So there was some legislative efforts undertaken in the late summer to try to extend those, in part because I think the perception was, for the most part, that public agencies had been relatively successful in transitioning their meetings to the electronic space. And so what we got was Assembly Bill 361, which went into effect on October 1. And essentially what it does is just extend those relaxed Brown Act meeting requirements under certain circumstances. And this law will expire by its own terms, I think, in January 1st of 2024. So I think this is meant to be a little bit of a test run because this law, I think, is designed to provide a legislative framework for how to hold remote meetings, not just in a pandemic, but in other types of emergency situations, wildfires, earthquakes, things like that. And so if this one goes off relatively successfully, I would imagine there'll be an effort to try to permanently extend these provisions in 2024. So we go to the next slide. So what are the circumstances under which you're going to be able to meet remotely? First off, there has to be a state of emergency declared under the California Emergency Services Act. Doesn't have to be a statewide emergency like we have now for COVID. It could be a localized state of emergency that the governor issues either under his own sort of purview or whether it's requested by a local agency such as a county. And so that usually happens with things like wildfires or earthquakes. The California Emergency Service Act covers a whole bunch of different scenarios, terrorism, landslides, you name it. So there has to be some sort of state of emergency. And as I said, we have one now related to COVID. The second requirement is that the public agency is meeting remotely, either because state or local officials have imposed social distancing requirements. So that's a very COVID focused one. Or the meeting is being held remotely because the legislative body has determined that meeting in person presents imminent risks to health and safety. The third one there is actually just designed to prevent a legal catch-22 where you want to meet remotely, but you have to meet in person to determine that you're going to meet remotely. So basically, you're talking about one of two scenarios, either social distancing or there's a determination that meeting in person presents an imminent risk to health and safety. So if we go to the next slide, one of the other things that the law does is, I'm sorry. And so in order to be able to continue to take advantage of this law, every 30 days, the legislative body has to meet again and conclude that the original justification for the remote meeting continues to be in place. And if you can't make that finding by a majority of vote, then the provisions of AB 361 don't apply anymore, and you fall back to the traditional Brown Act rules for remote meetings. So basically, every 30 days, you have to refresh whatever conclusion you reached to justify holding remote meetings. Okay. Next slide. One of the other things that this law does, because there was some ambiguity in the governor's executive order, is that it clarifies how you deal with public comment in a remote scenario. And it specifically requires there's a real-time comment requirement. So during the pandemic, what some local agencies did was that they actually required public comment to be submitted in advance of the meeting. And the comments were just filed with the legislative body at the meeting. That's disallowed now. So you have to provide an opportunity during the remote meeting in real time for the public to provide comment. And that ability has to be maintained until the public comment period is closed. And notably, if there's a technical disruption in the public's ability to provide comment, then effectively the meeting grinds to a halt, because you cannot take a vote or hear any other official action until that technical disruption is restored. That was also something that happened in the pandemic. Sometimes the public comment feature would turn off for some reason and the meeting would continue. If that happens now, you can't do that. If we go to the next slide, what does this mean for you guys? Why are we able to meet remotely? It's because the board already took care of this for you. They adopted a resolution in October of this year that made all of the necessary findings under AB 361 and extended the authority to hold remote meetings to include all district committees governed by the Brown Act, which is you guys. Notably, they carved out an ability for a committee to conclude that they want to meet in person. So that is an option for this committee, but presumably in January, if we're still meeting remotely, it's because the board would have refreshed the conclusions that it reached in October about the need for remote meetings. Okay. Any questions?
So does this mean we have the choice to meet in person or meet remotely?
You're going to be able to meet remotely so long as the board continues to allow you to. If you wanted to meet in person, I think all you would need to do is convene an in-person meeting and adopt a resolution at the beginning stating your reasons why you want to meet in person as opposed to remotely.
Okay, I'm sorry, Carlos. So when you say convene a meeting, what does that mean? We would need to go to the board and ask for permission to meet in person?
No, that's not my read of the resolution. I think you just decide to hold. So you'd probably have to decide at this meeting whether you want to hold the next meeting in person. And then at the beginning of that meeting, you'd adopt a resolution stating your reasons why.
So if we were to, if we were to do that, we'd take a vote today, and then and if we agreed to meet in person, we would have to come up with reasons to meet in person at the January meeting when we met in January. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, yeah. It's obviously a little clunky. Probably the easiest thing to do is to continue to meet remotely until the board decides that whatever risks are present are no longer in play. But they clearly wanted you to have that ability when they adopted the resolution. So.
Carlos, if the committee was to want to meet in person, and we started meeting in person, how does that apply to public comment or public participants wanting to be at the meeting?
So I just got this question the other day about whether you could, under AB 361, could you hold a hybrid meeting? Because some districts held hybrid meetings where you had three board members in the room, 2 remote, and then the public comment was remote. I think you can do that. I think if the entire committee meets in person, then I think you probably need to provide an in-person ability for public comment, even if that in-person public comment was limited to, say, some reduced capacity in the room to allow for social distancing. But I think it would be weird for the committee to all meet in person, but the public to be relegated to online comment only. Barb?
If the state was to lift the emergency order that we're operating under now statewide, then does this go away and everything reverts back to the way it used to be? Or is the remote meetings always going to be an option, even if there is no emergency order?
If the emergency order, if the state of emergency goes away, then you either have to find some other state of emergency under which to bring remote meetings, or you go back to the old rules. Effectively for COVID, once he lifts the state of emergency for COVID, I would think all meetings would need to be held in person at that point.
Okay, and then my second question is, so for us, this committee, then, given what you said, does this become an agenda item for us at each meeting to determine what are, where we're going to be meeting at the next meeting? I mean, if we're going to meet remotely at the next meeting? Is
I
that,
think-
that
I
is
think-
this a part of business of this committee?
I think that's going to be true for the district board. They're going to have to do this every time they meet to continue to justify the remote meetings that they've authorized. Unless this committee really feels strongly about meeting in person, I would probably say just ride what the district is doing until they change their minds.
Okay.
Carlos, it said, earlier it said something about a legislative body. This committee is not considered a legislative body, is it?
It technically is. The Brown Act defines a legislative body to be a governing body of a public agency, which is the district board, or any standing committee that has sole jurisdiction over a particular topic. So in your case, it's this, you're a standing committee with respect to the review of bond expenditures. So it's kind of weird to call you a legislative body because you don't legislate, but for purposes of the Brown Act, you very much are.
Okay.
Okay. Whoa.
Other questions?
So it doesn't sound like, Carlos, that if there are people on the committee who want to meet in person, but there are people who don't want to meet in person, that you could have this hybrid type of structure you were speaking of earlier.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So yes, we could not have a hybrid structure.
No, you could have a hybrid
Oh, we could.
structure.
Yeah.
Okay.
We would
You don't have to have you don't have to have a unanimous, we'll all meet in person vote is what I was getting at.
And then would the public comment be at the location where the people are in a joint meeting? Would that be, the public would access public comment by coming into that room?
If you're under AB 361 and you're technically holding a remote meeting with relaxed Brown Act requirements, you can still do a hybrid meeting where some of the committee is present. And I think it would be proper to restrict public comment to an online format, because some of the committee members are still participating remotely with relaxed Brown Act requirements.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay, good.
All right. Any further discussion? I'm assuming that everyone is okay with the status quo? Or is there a desire to change the status quo?
I think we should leave it the way it is for the time being.
I'll be honest with you, I hate this damn thing, but if everybody else is on board, let's just do it. I spend half my life staring at a computer screen now.
I love you, Jason. Okay.
Yeah, I don't disagree, Jason.
All right, so we'll roll with it and we'll reevaluate in January. Wow, and we thought the discussion of funds 35, 25, and 40 was interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, Carlos, anything else?
That's it for me. I think I'm gonna sign off. So I hope everybody has happy holidays.
We will
Thank you,
see you in January
Thank you, Carlos.
with much
Okay.
more, with the follow-up discussion or continuation on other funds.
Okay.
All right, we now return to our regular scheduled programming. Agenda item 6, which is a review of expenditures. We're gonna attempt to run through the, and apologies all, we're probably way off of our time. We're gonna attempt to run through the annual report format and upfront content a little bit. We did this in detail last spring, excuse me. So it should probably go a little faster this time. So this was in the Google Drive for this meeting. Kelly, I noticed it was the report and not all the appendices. The appendices are actually with the annual report package that is under the annual report section on the website. So
That is correct. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Kelly, I looked for this. Where was it?
Hold on, I'll screen share so that everybody can see.
So the report itself without the appendices was under meeting documents.
Yeah, I looked at it. Okay, well, I'm having trouble, obviously.
So if you were to, I'm going to first show you how to get there on the website, and then I'm going to show you the link that you received. So this is the main page for NBUSD.
That's what I looked at. Yeah,
If you go to Measure H,
got that.
and then you go to the Bond Oversight Committee,
Did that?
and then you go to this link here that says Meeting Documents,
Yeah.
and then you go to the meeting for your date, November 10th. And those are all the documents included for the
Thank you.
meeting.
Okay.
The
That was
the
trouble.
link that you received in the email from SBC would have taken you to this page with direction to hit the meeting docs.
Okay. All right.
And the only caveat there is that the full annual report, i.e. the annual report with all the appendices, is under the annual reports tab.
Yeah. Okay.
But the body of the report, which is what we're going to be reviewing here,
Yes.
That's what I was.
is
That's what I was. Yeah. Okay.
in the meeting minute, is in the 11/10/21 folder.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you.
So this does not include the appendices, like I said. It also doesn't include the cover letter that goes with the annual report. Okay, so this should be standard fare to all of us by now. So all this is templated verbiage. Presumably, we would need to maybe tweak the COVID-19 pandemic verbiage based on what Carlos just said, but we're not going to brain damage ourselves on that right now. If you can scroll down, Kelly, please. So again, this is all, anybody stop us if we're going too quick. Okay, let's go to page 4, please. I'm sorry, I guess page 5 on the PDF. So this is the table of contents or the appendices listing. One comment I had is that it might be helpful to have a listing of the pie charts as well for this go around, but that's not a game changer. We can work through that. Okay. Any questions on this page? Kelly, can you scroll down, please? Okay. So let's go to let's go ahead and go to page 7 on the PDF. Okay, keep going, Kelly, please. Anybody jump in here and stop us if we're going too fast? Okay. Okay. So we have item 4. Which is the implementation plan update. And then we have item 5. Which is sort of a primer on the history of how we got to where we are and all that good stuff. So if you can just scroll down a little bit, Kelly, so we can see the bottom. Yep, perfect. Oh, look, there's the numbers.
It's right there. Yeah.
Okay, so this would be updated to be fiscal year 2020 through 2021. This would be updated to reflect the Mike, what would it be? December 2020 updated implementation plan?
Yes.
Okay, so that sort of forms our foundation. And then all the data in the following pie charts that you'll see, that we will see, is based on that as our basis of understanding. This talks about the word encumbered versus committed, which simpletons like me use. And then this talks about the different funds. Okay. And we added this, we sort of elaborated on this to bring some clarity. I'm sorry, last time around, we elaborated on some of these definitions and key terms to bring some clarity to what people were seeing in the charts. Okay, so now we get into colors. So last time around, there were 10 pie charts, 10 charts that we developed. And let's just run through them and see if they feel right. And then we can talk about formatting and things like that later. And Richard, I know you're gonna have a critique on the colors, but we'll do a formal submittal to the design team and ask for that to be approved as noted. Okay, so number one is the funding sources. So simply stated, 269 million is Fund 21. The other funds get us to 293. Fair statement, Kelly and Mike?
At that time, yes.
Yep. At that time.
Okay.
It's different now?
It's different every time we run a report, depending upon interest earned in the different funds, or if the district receives additional state funding that year,
Right.
and a number of other factors.
Yeah, okay.
He's just double checking on us, Kelly. He knows.
Is it significantly different though, Kelly, or is it just 3.2 to 3.4 or something? I mean, that's all you're talking about, right?
Depending upon the amount of money in a given fund, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of interest. Obviously, as the funds deplete, the amount of interest is less. But I mean, yeah, in the terms of the larger pie chart, it's small percentage points. But in the terms of dollars, it's significant.
I was talking about what the chart looks like mostly.
Yeah.
Okay, so any comments here? Assume not. Okay. Pie chart number 2 is commitments or encumbrances. So essentially how much remains, how much has been committed, and by default, how much remains, right? So this time around, just for talking purposes, right, this 192 number is probably going to grow to, what do we think, Kelly?
I don't know off the top of my head without running a report what the total encumbrance is for the bond right at this moment, but I would just update that to the current amount, and then it would spread out between the different sites.
The middle is going to change a lot though. Am I correct? Because you took all that money and used it on other schools besides the middle schools.
Some of that's reflected in this report because those actions were taken a little while ago.
All right.
Well, and it's I think the basis, the foundation here, Richard, is that this is committed funds, right?
Yeah.
It's not the budget.
No, but I mean, the committed funds have gone to other schools as well.
Yes, but they were never from, if you're speaking of the middle school, they were never committed. They were budgeted at one point in time, but they were never committed.
That is correct.
So that would not, this, and the distinction here is simply that this type of data would not reflect that. Would not reflect that. Okay. All right. Number 3 is, so we've done the funding sources, we've done the commitments, and now this is the budget by category, right? So these categories these 5 categories tie back to the same 5 categories in both the key analytics reports as well as the implementation plan updates. So this was designed to provide a high level view of, you know, the percentage going to seismic, the percentage going to modernization and new construction, and the other categories. And just to be clear, falls into the previous comment Mr. Pearson made, you guys do not break out modernization / renovation from new construction, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Any other comments on this one, folks? Okay, so now that we've have these five categories, we then go through the corresponding 5 categories by elementary, middle school, or high school. So we do seismic. There's actually 2 seismics. And Kelly or Mike, I'm not remembering the distinction between 4 and 5, to be honest.
So there is one category in the implementation plan called seismic and emergency, and it's broken into 2 subcategories. This first chart is for just the seismic, and then the second chart is for just the emergency. But you can see here in parentheses where it says seismic and emergency category. Within that category, there are 2 breakouts.
Okay, got it. Thank you for that. Okay. All right, and then we move on to graph number 6 is the modernization and new construction category. Again, this is all broken down by elementary, middle, or high school or district-wide in this case, right? And these 5 sets or 6 sets of charts were designed to be able to communicate to Joe Public, you know, my son or daughter is in an elementary school and 45% for modernization and new construction is going there. Okay, so we have, so charts 4 and 5 are on seismic and emergency, chart 6 on modernization and new construction, chart 7's on safety. Chart number 9 is on technology, right, which is a little different.
Chart 8, but yes.
I'm sorry, chart 8, you're correct, is on technology, right? So this breaks down, does not break down by elementary, middle, or high school, but breaks it down by technology widget category. How's that for very sophisticated description of technology?
And hang on, I have a question. Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, you went on mute, Barb.
Sorry. Chart 8, it looks like this because these were district-wide expenses across
That is correct.
all school
Mhm.
sites. Okay.
Yeah, breaking them up by site probably wouldn't give the committee or the public much information because almost all of these are spread out across every area of the district. So better to break them up by technology type.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Just out of curiosity, and I'm not, you can relax, Mr. Pearson, I'm not going down the path, but are these tracked by campus?
Absolutely.
Yes, yeah, they are.
Okay. Okay, then charts 9 and 10, let's go to that. So chart 9 was our program, our PMCM chart, right? So these are the management costs. So what this is intended to say is of the 269 million, notwithstanding our discussions earlier, 21 million are management costs. So it's made up of the program and construction management, which is in green there. Now, also within this category are 2 other categories. So there's sort of like a PM&R category, which is miscellaneous improvements. Fair statement, Mr. Pearson?
I think so.
right? Small projects that go
Mhm.
nowhere else that fall into this general category. So really, whatever 20.4% of $20 million, that's brick and mortar work that's out there. And then the contingency is, this is a program-wide contingency fund. Fair statement?
Yes.
Okay, so the district, as everyone probably recalls, has contingency embedded within each of the individual funded projects. And then below the line, program-wide, there's an additional contingency fund. And that's what this represents, right?
Yes.
So this is really, chart 9 is really based on the object code, and includes more than just strict management costs. Okay, any questions on that? Any comments? Everybody still awake? All right. Chart number 10. So this is, this was intended to show the bricks and mortar construction costs as compared to consultant costs. So Kelly or Mike, maybe you can elaborate on what's actually included in the consultant costs.
Sure, Mike, I can take that if you'd like.
Sure. I know some, but you probably know all.
No, the construction cost is really just contracts with contractors. So it's dollars spent, or, you know, if you're looking at a budget, dollars budgeted on actual brick and mortar construction. Everybody else that is involved with the project is considered a consultant. Inspectors, architects, geotechnical consultants, surveyors, every single person that touches the job site that isn't a contractor is a consultant. And if you see those in other terms, sometimes you see them used as hard versus soft costs. So soft cost is everyone else. The hard cost is the hard construction cost.
So your FF&E would go under construction?
No, it would be a soft cost. That's a vendor that we purchase furniture from. Because it's not a contractor.
Okay. And so that goes for equipment, right? If you buy a piece of equipment, that's also in the black.
Yeah, fairly rare. Normally we're buying equipment through our contractors, but if that were to occur.
Okay. So it's really all non-contractor commitments, encumbrances. Okay, any questions on the charts? Somebody's got to have a question or a comment. Okay, any desires at this point? Subject to further review of any additional or different charts? Obviously, all the data is going to be brought current to 2020 to 2021.
When will that happen? When will it be brought current?
Well, we'll have to work with Mike and Kelly and team to get that data, right? We have that data right now, I would assume, because the books are closed, right?
So the goal for this report is to take it to the March board meeting, which if you backwards map from that means that in the January meeting that we have with this committee, we would bring you a draft with all updated information. So between now and then, we would be updating it. And yes, to Kevin's question, the books are closed for fiscal year 21-22, or I'm sorry, 2021, closed in June. And so this report would be based on that information.
But when will we be able to read it?
We would be reviewing it at the January meeting.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so specific comments. Last year, in last year's report, right, we had the specific comments in an appendix. In the traffic light table, as I call it, which was originally intended to provide a status. Let me back up. Was originally intended to collect all of the comments from the preceding 3 years of annual reports, 3 years worth of annual reports, and provide a summary status on each of them. So we are, we're not going to get through a discussion of specific comments in the next 14 minutes. The intent would be to provide some similar type of document, this time within the report, that summarizes previous specific comments and provides for any current, any specific comments that are raised in this annual report cycle. Okay. And that's really the meat of the report. And this is also available. Kelly, where did you go to get this? You went to the annual reports section, or did you go to the meeting minutes section?
I'm sorry, I just lost it inadvertently. Hold on one moment.
I'm assuming you went to the annual reports section to get that.
No, I did not. The links are live in the document that I provided for this week's meeting. So we went to the specific comments section of the report that we were just reviewing. And if you click this link right here, it's going to take you to all of the attachments, including the specific comments.
Okay.
Gee, that's as good as putting wheels on our luggage. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, very good. All right, so can we jump back to the report, please? Okay, so the rest of this, and then come all the appendices after the specific comments. And generally, okay, so you have the Measure H bond proposal text. You have the Measure H, then you have Appendix B, which is the projects, the original master plan, executive summary, and then all of the implementation plan updates. You have the key analytics report, sorry. Thank you, Kelly, sorry. Which is the standard key analytics report.
Looks like this, just to refresh everybody's memory.
Yeah.
Which is several pages in and of itself.
Yep.
Then we have the audits, right, which would be updated and presumably presented by the third-party auditor at the January meeting. We have so financial audit and performance audit. Can you scroll down, Kelly, please? Okay, then we have the meeting minutes. Then for those of us that can't sleep at night, we have the legalese and the ed code. So those were appendices F and G last time. And then we had, in this case, we had Appendix H for the specific comments. We had then Appendix I, which was the bylaws. We had Appendix J, which was added in last year's report, I believe, with the, helping people understand that borrowing money is not free. And then we had the project sheets with the photos. So any questions, comments, requests for different formatting for this coming report? Annual report?
No,
Sure, are you okay?
Kevin, I have a suggestion.
Yes, sir.
Someplace in here, let's put in the original principal, the original interest, original print, and how much has been paid. That came with that Rob supplied this to the Napa Valley Taxpayers Association. And the fact that original principal in this was $450 million, I think this should be included in there. And that so far the outstanding is still 383 million. Can we do that someplace? I'm sure that Rob can provide us with this.
Okay, so your ask is for original principal and original interest in
Yeah, if
current
you like,
payment?
I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you, Kevin. Leon sent it to me.
I, under advice of counsel, declined to comment. Okay.
So do
Yeah,
I,
once you-
but it's still probably true because Rob supplied it to him. So,
Okay, okay, why don't you send that to me or send that to us, please?
very well.
Okay. Chart 11. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so for January or by the January meeting, if there's any other comments related to formatting or content upfront excluding specific comments, please send them forward. Okay. All right, back to our agenda. Apologies that we are.
Before we leave that topic, I just want to be clear on the timeline. So if we were to provide you with a draft at the January meeting, I would ask that even specific comments, if you have a specific comment that you'd like to include, that you send it to sbc@nbusd.org. We can always review them in the January meeting, but having them organized and ahead of time is going to be really helpful. And then, you know, if we work in the subsequent months, I know Skip did a lot of work on getting them organized in a spreadsheet. We can do that, but the conversation is a lot more fruitful if we have that information ahead of time to give to you guys. And to avoid a serial meeting, it's helpful for you to send them in, and then we can make sure they get to the right places and get organized.
Good comment. All right, and we are working on refreshing the timeline for getting the report done, recognizing again that there's lots of successor activities that need to happen in order to get done. Okay.
So Kevin,
Yes, ma'am.
just in terms of the agenda and how we want to move forward from here. So there's about 20 minutes left of items that, you know, item number 7, item 9, and item 10, and there's 2 remaining items on the current number 6. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention in terms of where, you know, we are right now. That would probably push this meeting to about 6:30
Correct.
for your information.
And I'll just remind everybody, well, remind Barb and Kevin, and then inform the rest of the committee that there was a request for a high level update on where we are with the Measure H bond program. That information was provided in your folder. If you want additional time to read over that, or you want to keep that information and table it till the next meeting, so that we can speak to some of the other slides, that report is in your Google folder. So that's just something to keep in mind. We did not anticipate we dig in a lot of detail to this report, considering how many agenda items we had when we planned the agenda.
Yeah, and of course, I don't think we anticipated the length of Carlos's presentation on the Brown Act information, which we definitely needed to have that, and the conversations with around the role of the CBC with regards to funding, other funding buckets that the district is using to pay for projects in partnership with Measure H. So we had a pretty full meeting. So there you go. That's where we're at.
Hey,
Okay.
I just want to jump in here real quick with a quick break. I got plans, so I'm still stuck at my desk chaining this thing. So I'm going to shut this down and call in on my phone on the drive. So I'll be back in probably about 2 to 5 minutes. however long it takes me to lock up my office and roll out. So I'll see you guys on the other side.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, so Kelly, what is the name of the document that provides the financial overview of the spend down?
I will show the committee.
Yeah,
Where
if
to
we
find
can,
that?
if we can,
One
if we can,
moment.
if we can just maybe open the document.
The cover
Um,
looks just like that one that is here on the slide. And then if you give me 1 second, I'll pull it up. I'm sorry, I lost some of my tabs. There it is. It was in your CVOC folder called Napa Valley Unified School District Measure HCOC report dated 11/10.
HCOC report, okay.
Let's see, sorry, trying to find it. Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay. Okay, so maybe if we can just, let's just look at this for a minute. Can you go to page 3, Kelly? So just from a high level, this is where we're at, right?
Mhm.
So we just, and then we'll move off and people can review the detail. But of the 274, right, the remaining, I'm sorry, the total commitments are 262, right? So $11 million to spend down, 11, yeah, $12 million to spend down.
Yeah.
We're looking at that, right?
That is correct.
Mhm.
So said differently. Sorry, Mike, I'm apologizing to you in advance. We are 96% complete as of Halloween.
Mhm.
So just gives you an idea of where we're at. Okay, so I'm assuming that everybody is interested in keeping us on track and getting out of here and not running for another half hour.
Can I ask a question? Oh, Kelly, do you have that says how much? Mike, you showed it to us at the taxpayers meeting, that breakdown of what you spent all the money on that didn't go to the middle school.
The breakdown of the
Yeah,
money
this one went for the gym roof. They got all those things. I mean,
hang on.
So, so I don't have that document at my fingertips, but when the monies were reallocated, a good chunk of that money went to the American Canyon Middle School Student Commons Project, which is the new essentially multi-purpose room library and
right.
classroom building.
But they had a breakdown at the taxpayers meeting that they sent out to us, and I thought it was very.
Yeah, we didn't cover it at the Taxpayers Association, if my understanding is correct, and I had to leave that meeting earlier, so maybe
Okay.
it was
Well,
briefly
it's just-
covered. But
maybe-
yeah, we can share it.
Maybe just find it someplace. That's all.
Yep.
If we can find that information, we can certainly put it in your folder.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Good, Richard? Thumbs up? Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna break my silence. The information that he was just talking about, that might be kind of good to put into this report. So when
Next year,
this,
though, for next year, not this year.
oh, okay, never mind. I'll go back to my silence.
Nope, it's okay, Jill. When you say next year, Richard, you're talking about 21 to 22?
Well, they put
Yeah,
this-
I actually think Jill's comment is valid
Yeah.
because some of the expenditures of the money that was reallocated from the middle school was spent in
I think
the
so.
past fiscal year. So Jill, I think you're meaning putting it in the CVOC annual report, maybe in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I would, because I would think there'd be people out there going like, well, if they didn't build that school, what do they do with the money? And I think
Absolutely.
that would be
Yeah.
useful.
It's a good point.
Okay. We'd have to figure out where to slot that in, but we can do that. All right.
Sorry about that.
Nope. We appreciate you breaking your cone of silence, Jill.
Have you ever said that to Rich?
No, I haven't. Others might have. All right. Sorry, Richard. Okay. We're too mean to you. Okay. So let's go back to where we were. And so, shoot, I'm sorry. I believe we are done with, okay, so just a quick update on Napa Junction.
So are we going to the next item?
We are going to D, yes, 6D. Sorry, I should have announced the page turn.
Okay, so we skipped C.
I
Which
thought we
is
covered C.
spend down information on measure H. So there were two slides for C. So there was the one that we just talked about, which was the report. And then there's the
sorry.
spend down
Okay.
information that was requested at the last meeting.
Okay, sorry, Kelly, didn't mean to cut you off there.
No big deal. The committee had requested information on the spend down of the remainder of the capital improvement program. So we put together this document. It is a rough outline of schedule. You can see our little disclaimer there at the bottom that says, the schedule's always subject to change upon supply chain issues, emergencies, things like that. But this is a rough outline of how the remainder of the projects will get spent down. And
So
some of these projects are broken down by phase or by site because they're multi-phase, multi-site projects. So that's why you see multiple lines under one color for some of those. So even though it's one allocation and one project like replacement of fields, it's happening at multiple sites. So we're breaking that down so you guys can see the timeline on that.
And your blue line is the data date, right? So everything to the right of the blue line is still what's in progress.
Actually, that was the next thing I was going to cover. The blue line represents a rough idea of the end of the measure H dollars.
I'm sorry. Yep, that's pretty obvious. Okay. Okay, so the blue line, everything to the right of the blue line would be non-measure H funds.
Yes, so if you take the column all the way to the left, it shows the funding source by project and then by individual site, if it gets broken down to that level of detail, and then stretched out between now and the end of the program. Some of these say to be determined in TBD, and that is because they have other factors that are determining how the schedule is lined out. An example would be the replacement of the field at American Canyon Middle School in specific, because that property is owned by both the district and the city. It requires some coordination. So that project, is to be determined for that reason. The farm is to be determined based upon funding from property sales and other items. So there's placeholders in the schedule, but that is important to note that the TBDs have other mitigating factors associated with them.
Schedules are always fluid.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on this? Good graphic. Thank you for the preparation to put this together. Okay. All right. We can just quickly run through this quick like a bunny.
So this is a breakdown at the request of the committee. We've provided a breakdown by object code for the funds for Napa Junction Elementary School. And for those of you who don't recall, an object code is a term that is used in school district accounting to identify a type of service. So there are numerous codes that make up account strings that are extremely long. But one of the sections of that long account string will be an object code. So it breaks out the different types of services that a vendor might provide. So Kevin had requested that the information on Napa Junction be broken down by object code. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, this breaks down by object code, and it also covers multiple funding sources. So this is the whole big picture of the Napa Junction Elementary School project.
Wow.
And the intent was, the intent was to sort of use the deep dive we did at Napa Junction last time as an example to mimic the metrics that are, for example, at the front end of the report, as far as ratios of, building contractors to everything else and things like that. Okay. Any questions here, folks? I know we're out of time. Apologies about that.
We're good. We're on the home stretch, Kevin. You're doing a good job. A lot of information tonight.
All right. Okay. So this is in here because people always beat up the big bad contractor. Sorry, Kelly, go ahead.
No, this is just a breakdown of the expenditures to date for AC Martin Architects, formerly ATI. They were the designers for the Napa Junction Elementary School. They've got two names because they were bought out in the middle of our project. Same project team remained, just to be clear on that, and their offices and everything stayed the same. So no change in service, just change in name. The original contract, the additional services paid, and the current contract total. I wanted to give the committee some context for these numbers because they seem pretty big. When you start a project, the fee is can be based upon lump sum services, or it can be based on the construction contract percentage. In this case, this contract signed with ATI many years ago predates not some of you CBOC members, but definitely Mike and I. But this one was a percentage-based contract. So as the scope of the project grew, so did the fee. That was part of the budget planning for this project. But it is also great to know that the current fee, including all the ads, is at 9.7%. For those of you not in this type of construction, I will tell you that's an excellent fee. For design services, we typically budget on the low side at 8.5%, 9%, and at the high side, if you get into the heart of the Bay Area, you might be getting charged up to 13 to 14% for architectural fees. So even with all the ads, we're pretty consistent with a good architectural fee. Factors contributing to ad services, just a quick review: increased construction scope during design. So if we say, we wanted 6 buildings and now we want 7, that would be an additional service. Changes to the construction scope during construction. So if you say, I want to add doors here, I want to add a sink, I want to take this big room and make it into 3 small rooms, all of that design work is owed an ad service. And as I mentioned earlier, the structure of the original contract, whether it's a lump sum fee or whether it is a percentage-based contract. So those are some factors in how ad services crop up. What's not included in an ad service, obviously, if the designer makes an error and then they have to correct that error, they have to then do that at their own cost. And then also we're careful at the end of the project to make sure that there isn't double up between the fee that they may be charging to add scope versus a straight up ad, like adding a wall or adding a faucet or anything like that. So we do a pretty detailed review to make sure they're not double dipping on those fees. So that just gives you a quick breakdown of the contract with ATI and the work they did at Napa Junction. So if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer.
So Kelly, sorry, this essentially, it was a lump sum contract at a percentage of the final adjusted construction budget.
This contract was a percentage-based contract. So their initial fee was based upon an initial construction estimate for the project. And as the value grew, so did the services they provided. In addition to that, there might be one-time ad service fees, as I mentioned, for I'm adding a wall, I'm adding a door, but those are reconciled at the end of the project to make sure there isn't double dipping.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, and you described the other type of design contract. Could you repeat that again, please?
Yeah, the other kind is called a lump sum. So the way that one works is I have hired you, architect, to build me a new multi-purpose building, and the construction value is $12 million. You are tasked to do that. And they still give you a percentage, but when the project grows, they have to renegotiate their fee. It's not moving. It's a lump sum fee. I want this many square feet and I want it done for this amount of money. If we then grow the project, then they are owed those one-time ad services. But it isn't a sliding scale the way it is on a percentage-based fee.
But on a percentage, is the percentage-based fee and not to exceed, T&M not to exceed, or is it lump sum? I'm sorry, I'm being dense tonight.
So two types of contracts. One is a percentage-based fee. So I would like to build a school, Mr. Architect, and the cost is going to be $25 million. And they say, okay, great, I'm going to charge you 8.5%.
Okay.
If the project turns into $30 million, he gets to charge 8.5% on the $5 million that it grew.
And this is the contract.
That is this type of contract that we
Okay.
have with ATM.
Okay.
Then there is a lump sum contract, which says, Mr. Architect, I would like to build a multi-purpose room that is 20,000 square feet. And it has a kitchen and it has a stage. And then they say, okay, yes, we can do that. And we're going to charge you X amount of dollars. Now, if I then say, I've changed my mind and I want to add a second story to that building,
Okay.
they can charge me a fee for that,
Okay.
but there's no sliding scale.
Okay. So it's really percentage based at budget versus scope based.
Correct. Mhm.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Any other questions from the committee besides how quickly we're going to get to Pier 30? Okay. All right. Why don't we let's conclude with number 7 then. And we'll skip over 9 and 10. And let's wrap it up with a project update, please.
So thanks, Kevin. So Kelly's given this particular presentation to the Board of Education regarding the update of the American Canyon Middle School Student Commons. It's obviously going to be a little bit further along than it looks in these particular pictures, but give you a really good sense of the grandeur and the building that is being currently put onto this campus. And so I'll let Kelly, kind of explain more in details, but it's the project we're really pleased with to date, not only with what the building's turning out to be, but also, the relationship with the contractor and everybody involved with the project. It's really moving along really smoothly. So Kelly, take it away.
Yeah, sure. So this is a picture of just a little bit, like Mike said, a little further along now, but what you can see here is that the framing and the shear ply is going up, both interior and exterior structures going up. And you can also see here the columns that you're seeing getting set that are not part of the building. That's going to be the shaded area for student outdoor seating. So it's going to be under an overhang in the building. So if you can imagine almost like a wedge of pie shaped area that they're going to be, feels kind of like an indoor outdoor space. So you can kind of see the shape of the building taking place here. All right, so we also wanted to highlight some other areas that that the campus is going to receive. So you can see there's an interior shot, a rendering of the interior exterior location that I just showed you in real life. That's what it looks like in the rendering.
We're building B? Is that building B we're talking about?
Yes, building B is the new building.
Thank you.
So the indoor outdoor space that I talked about is the kind of triangular space with the blue arrow taking you over to the rendering. And then we also wanted to highlight the outdoor amphitheater area that is going to have some connectivity to the library and also to the Innovation Center, which is a large style classroom that can be used for lots of different purposes. In addition to that, the site is going to receive all new landscaping in the interior area, all new hardscape, and some new areas to do PE activities, as well as multiple eating areas and gathering space and outdoor learning environments.
Is this disruptive to the school that's going on now?
No, not at all, Richard. They haven't seen any, they don't feel anything at all. They don't hear anything,
Just checking.
nothing like that. The campus looks amazingly like it did before.
Uh-huh.
No, it's very disruptive, and they have been extremely pliable to work with. I mean, but it's been disruptive without a doubt. So, and but the payoff is going to be an amazing structure for their campus to house their students.
And really an overall change in the look of the entire site, because along with everything that we're showing you here, they're also going to get a fresh coat of exterior paint on the whole site, which is going to tie everything together really nicely. So delving in a little bit to the PE spaces that I just talked about, there are going to be covered shade areas that'll keep kids out of the elements. We're saying shade, but it also is going to keep you out of the elements for the rain. So if it's drizzly outside, we can still hold PE classes in those areas. This is an example of one of the structures. We're still finalizing the look of the final product, but just to give you an idea, it's something that's pretty substantial. And then also we're in the midst of deciding what kind of equipment we'll be using. So these are some examples of equipment we're looking at for kind of the same sort of thing you'd see on a walking trail or something like that that can be used for PE classes. And then a zoom in on the PE area, which would have the covered areas and then a variety of circuit training exercises.
I think it's important to note too, on everything that Kelly's been speaking to, the building and up to this these outdoor areas. We worked closely with staff on what their needs were and what their desires were. So it's it's been a very collaborative effort with the school site staff too. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, and to that same point, this site only has one gymnasium and the other middle schools have two. So we really wanted to focus on PE to make sure that they had some other areas to do PE because their setup is a little different than the other middle schools. So upcoming event, next week we'll be doing a beam signing with the community there of students and teachers. Because of COVID restrictions, we're not making it a public event. We're just going to have representative students from different groups come up and do a beam signing. If those of you who do not know what a beam signing is, it's exactly what it sounds like. We take a beam and allow members of the community to sign their names to it, to write messages, and then that beam is flown up and placed in the structure. So it's a little bit of community building. As Mike mentioned, it's been highly impactful to the campus. So we wanted to do a little bit of something to give back and get some excitement going about the new project. Yes.
So I'm sorry, I didn't mean, I thought I guess you paused, you didn't stop.
It's okay, go ahead.
The bottom right, the class of 2018, that the last two little sentences, I guess you call it that. What does that say?
Where it says class of 2018 has the hearts, Jill?
Yeah, and then then is it 1F now, DA?
It says I know the WAE yeet. I don't know. This is an example. This is
just an example. This isn't what went up the yeah, the event hasn't taken place yet. This is just a picture of a beam.
Okay, just in case there's like a secret message there or something.
I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is, but that particular secret message is buried at the Piedmont Hills High School Science Building in San Jose. So
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is just an example of what students tend to do. Our beam will be a little less crowded because in a non-COVID environment, this one was at a high school, we literally set the beam out in the parking lot and let every kid who wanted to come by and sign. So this one will be a little bit different because of the COVID-19 protocols, but we will be posting the video and pictures to our website, and we're happy to share those with the committee when they come out. And that is the end of the update on American Canyon Middle School, unless anybody has any other questions.
No questions? Okay,
Yeah, how come Skip gets to sit at the beach?
All right. Because that's where all registered professional engineers go on their time off. All right, with that, I would recommend that we skip over 9.
9 is mostly informational anyway. These links in the agenda and in the slideshow are live. So if there's ever any confusion about where you find your documents or information about Measure H, we just wanted to re-provide those links to you.
Thank you.
Actually, that is important. And then with 10, our next meeting is January 12th, correct? Just reconfirming Mike and Kelly, because normally it's the 3rd Wednesday. Not saying we can't stick to the 2nd Wednesday, just making sure.
I'm double checking. I see it as the 12th. Yes.
Okay.
Not sure why we didn't do the 19th, but we didn't.
We did talk about AB 361 in excruciating detail. All right. With that, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and then just for all the members, we wanted to let you know that we as a school district have been doing what we call a facility awareness engagement sessions with various stakeholders surrounding and within the district. And in talking with Dr. Musetti, we also want to engage our CVOC members in this presentation as well too. So I will have my secretary be reaching out to you to set you up into small groups. We can't all, unless we bring it to an official meeting, we can't have you all meeting outside of a meeting. We'll be violating the Brown Act. So we'll be setting up the smaller meetings. Hopefully you can attend when we send these invitations out, but I'll have Marie McMurray, who's my secretary, working with each of you to have you come in smaller groups to hear the presentation. And that presentation is given by myself, Rob Manguala, and Dr. Musetti as well. So just wanted to give you that information.
And what is that called again, Mike?
It's the presentation is called the MBSD Facility Awareness Engagement.
Is that the one we saw already, Mike?
I believe you saw that one in the Bond Oversight Committee.
Yeah,
Excuse me, the Taxpayers Association.
Taxpayers.
Yeah, so Jill and Richard have seen it. So Jill and Richard, you are more than welcome to when we reach out to you to attend again for sure, if you'd like to. We've had other people attend twice and they found it actually helpful to see it again.
Yeah.
But if you would prefer not to, you don't have to. But we would like to extend that invitation to you as well.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, with that, we will call this meeting done at 6:23. Appreciate everybody hanging in there.